In this episode of Any Voices, I'm joined by Penny Mohr, our Indigenous Education Coordinator at the Northeast School Division. For the first in a new series exploring Indigenous education, we dig into what it really means to learn from the land, not just on it, and how a special place called Loveland is helping students and educators reconnect with nature, culture, and each other. Penny shares the story behind Loveland and the vision for this space rooted in authentic land-based learning. We talk about the importance of meeting students where they're at and the vital role of elders and knowledge keepers, as well as how curriculum outcomes can come to life outdoors in unexpected and transformative ways. Whether you're an educator curious about land-based learning or simply looking to deepen your understanding of Indigenous perspectives in education, this conversation is rich with insight and inspiration. Join us as we dig into how Loveland came to be, the importance of building relationships, when it's the best time to visit, the curricular connections, as well as examples of the ways students and teachers learn together. Let's join the conversation. Welcome to Northeast Voices, a podcast that spotlights the innovators and change makers in education. We're here to share the stories of inclusion, empowerment, and the impactful connections with the Northeast School Division and beyond, focusing on the pivotal role of students, families, and teachers. Join us as we dive into the conversations revealing the strategies and moments shaping the future of education. Any Voices is your platform for inspiration and connection, and is recorded in the Northeast School Division, sharing the land of Treaties 4, 5, 6, and homeland of the Métis in Northeast Saskatchewan. Be sure to subscribe and join our community of innovators and change makers. Let's get started. Welcome to our next episode of Any Voices. Today I have Penny Mohr with me. She is a coordinator of Indigenous Education here at the Northeast School Division, and we are looking forward to creating a series to answer your questions about Indigenous education, your wonderings, and have a space for us to talk and have some of those conversations. So I'm excited for Penny to join me this morning. Welcome, Penny.
Thank you for inviting me. As you said, I am the learning coordinator for the NESC in Indigenous Education. But of course, as you know, because you're in a similar role, I have voices in a number of different areas as well, because it's as big as my portfolio is and diverse. I still get to say things on other things that happen in the division, which is great and exciting too. So.
Yes, so we're excited that Penny joined us as a consultant last year and has moved into the coordinator role this year. And so we were brainstorming the other day about what could we do a podcast episode on, and then we thought perhaps an ongoing series talking about Indigenous education and digging further into what that means and what does it look like in the schools in the Northeast. So today's feature, and again, stay tuned because we will have future series or future episodes are with Penny. And what we'll do is if you have any questions, please send them to myself or to Penny and we'll work those into the future episodes. But today's feature is Loveland. So we are very fortunate in the Northeast School Division to have a space for land-based learning. So Penny, maybe you could start us off talking just a little bit about what is Loveland?
Okay, so Loveland, of course, it's close to my heart. That's not the reason it's called that. It's just based in around the village of Love. And we were very fortunate in the lady that was my friend and mentor, Sharon Meyer, was in conversation with Verna St. Denis or Denny. I always hear different versions of that. They were talking about their roles, and Sharon was telling them how much she really wanted to get land-based started. And Dr. Verna said, like, hey, like, I got this piece of land, and sometimes I used to bring students from the university out there, and they started talking. And so in her generosity and humble spirit, Dr. Verna, she allows us to use that space to bring students from the NESD to learn off the land and do cultural teachings out at that space.
It's very exciting that we are able to visit the land and to work with yourself. And often there are other people that come out to help. So when you arrive, who might you see at Loveland?
Usually I'm the person you'll see out there. So it just depends on what the teachers or the students need. And we really try and respond to what their learning needs are for that time. Right now, we're not as culturally based as I wish we were. We will hopefully get there in the future. Simply because many of our learners, there's been a really change that they don't have experience on the land. So right now it's just to get them familiar with being on the land and what the land means. That's the stage that we're at right now. In future, I really hope that we do start bringing in some more cultural practices, not that we don't already, we do some, but we have to really meet the learners where they're at. And so right now, it's just having that familiarity and that joy and that like it really does. Like it lightens your spirit. Like that's really the best way of being on the land. So as I tell the students, you know how your teachers are always saying to you, you gotta use your inside voice. I said, "The greatest thing about Loveland is we don't have to use our inside voices, so we can be loud, and we don't have to always sit in one space, and so we're active." And so students really seem to respond to that part of being out on the land, so it's been quite fantastic that way. Sometimes when you come out there, depending on what the needs are or what teachers are requesting, we do have some elders that we do and knowledge keepers that we do invite, depending on, and that list is growing. We are developing relationships with our partners in the area, not just there, but throughout the Northeast School Division. And so as we build our repertoire, because when you ask an elder, at least that's my teaching, I have to maybe preface some things is that I have my teachings and I've been really blessed to having elders and knowledge keepers work with me from all across this province. And so I don't want to ever paint anything as pan-Indigenous because we all have different ways of seeing and knowing on Turtle Island, and I can only talk about what I was told. So some of my teachers have told me that you get the lessons when you're ready for them. That's the big thing.
Mhm.
So, like, you could hear a story, that's a good example, and you might hear that story 100 times in your lifetime, but that
Mhm.
time that you hear that story, it will speak to you for what you need. And so sometimes what students need might vary. And sometimes it's, the joy of a face on a kid just to be able to see their culture being respected. That's a big part of it. But sometimes we do have elders, and that's kind of where I was going. I kind of went on a little tangent road there on on found a path.
Mhm.
But all elders, everybody has gifts. And so it's to find the right elder with or the knowledge keeper or knowledge holder with the proper gift. And so that's an ongoing process because it's relationship. The way I was taught, I can't just go to somebody and say, "Hey, come and do this for me." I had to build that relationship before I
Mhm.
can go and ask them. So that's an ongoing process that is happening. Um Within the division. So, this being only year 2, it is growing. So, we do have some elders that we do invite. We have, some from Cumberland House. We have some from, Kiniston that come.
Mhm.
So, depending on the age of the student will really depend on what they will be ready for. That's a big part of it. So, for example, if we were to have a sweat, we have a gentleman who comes from Kiniston,
Mhm.
Trevor Chickadoo, and he comes and he leads sweats for us, for students. And so that is something, it's an all day process. We actually build the sweats, we do like the framework, he does teachings, all those things happen. And then the sweat happens. So that is something for older students, and Trevor is a very we appreciate his time that he gives to us, but he's a busy man, so it you have to kind of try and book in a little early if that's something that you're interested in.
So I think that circles us back to Loveland in Saskatchewan depends a little bit on the weather, and I
Yeah,
have a couple questions to
yeah,
go in here. So what are the prime times for teachers to reach out to you? And then my
sure,
segue, I have one question after that, just sort of on
sure.
the curriculum connections. But let's
Ab
go with when's the best time to visit?
Okay. Love kind of our agreement. We can't have any permanent structures out there. So we don't have like washroom facilities or even warm up facilities out there. We do like don't think that we don't have washrooms. We bring in
Yeah.
porta potties. We do
Yes.
have that. And
Yeah.
we do have one outhouse out there. But the best time to go, and just because it's more user friendly,
Mhm.
is in the fall. So we open up whenever teachers are ready to bring their students in the fall, and depending on the weather, like sometimes we have beautiful falls and like, last year, we shut it down I shut it down early at beginning of October, but then we could have been going until November because the weather it really depends on when water is going to freeze out there. So, we
Yes.
usually have a pretty good idea. So, the land tells us when it's ready to rest, and
Yes.
because of that, that's we wanna listen to it. So, this year, our last date was, just because it started getting a little cooler and there'd be a little bit of ice on the water when we start in the morning, we shut it down just before the long weekend for Thanksgiving. So we really try and listen to what the land is telling us and when it's ready. The same thing happens in the spring is
Right.
that we have to wait until the land is dry. We don't really want to go out there when it's muddy just because of people just don't like doing that. I mean, that
Yeah.
realistically. Um, so we kind of wait until it's really good. And usually a group actually from TMSS, the outdoor ed
Nice.
environmental science class is usually our first group that's ever out there. And usually we have them set up a teepee. So we do
Nice.
have teepees. They're massive, big structures. And I've had grade sixes put up the teepees with us with lots of help from their teachers. And that's the other thing is it's not just about the young, like the K to 12 students that we could have out there, but the teachers and the parents that come with us, we're all learning alongside because the land always teaches me something new every day. So
Mhm.
every time I'm out there, so it's a it's bringing that learning that happens all the time. It's that lifelong learning that happens out there. So to answer your question, we could have us out there in the winter that I would never say no to being out in the land. I'm
Mhm.
not a big fan of the cold, but I wouldn't say that we could never not do it. Our biggest issue is to get into the land, into
Yes.
the site. So if I had a group of teachers that were gonna come out, say maybe for a week, I could always go and like get it plowed out just so that
Right.
it's easy to get in. Otherwise, it would be a bit of a hike to go from the road, yeah, to get in, so
Nice. So lots of opportunity coming up as we head into spring. And if you're catching this
absolutely.
episode later on, there's time in the fall.
Yeah,
And you talked about it all sort of depends what the students need in that moment and what they're
yeah,
ready for, where the land is at in its journey through the year. So as a teacher, if I reach out to you, what would you and again, we always link back to our curriculum and ground in what we're learning there. So could you
right,
talk a little bit more about that when a teacher reaches out to you and the conversation about how we can connect what we're learning in class with what we're learning outside. And if it works to jump into a little bit of what's land-based versus outdoor ed,
sure.
maybe that's a good segue into that.
Yeah, okay, so maybe we'll talk about maybe the difference between outdoor ed and land-based, and I love both of them, so I don't
Mhm.
wanna put so outdoor ed sometimes is like how to survive on the land. Or some people use it as, "We're going outside and we're gonna do math while we're going outside with our
Right.
books," and that's perfectly okay, and that all has its place. Versus land-based, that's where we're actually learning from the land and being on the land. The land is also our teacher when we're out there. Um, and usually when we use that term land-based, we're talking about some cultural teachings that are going to be gently infused into whatever you're learning that day. So it's not ever, um, like I said, it's when you're ready to hear those lessons. So it may be there, and some students might not remember that this conversation happened, or this analogy was used, or this teaching was used. But there might be that one student that will be like, "Ah, I get it," right? So
Right.
it's learning the teacher the class it's more than just the land being a classroom. The land itself is actually a teacher, if that kinda helps makes the difference. Yeah.
I think it does because often we'll hear about land-based learning and outdoor
Mm.
education, and the focus is just a little bit different. And I
Yeah.
appreciate the distinction you've drawn between and how we're learning from the land. And so we're headed out to love. I've reached out to you to book a
Yeah.
time, which is always weather dependent. So sometimes we have to have backup plans for for that, but we're reaching out. What are some of the questions that you would ask me as a teacher, looking to make that link between being out on the land
Right.
and the curriculum and what we're studying?
Sure. We just actually made it's interesting you should ask this because I just made a new form just because I
Right.
would be back and forth and having like 30 emails between one teacher. And so just to help us both get forward to be able to book this in and know what we're going to do. So when you fill out the form, which is available on Kukum's Gathering, and there's a
Mhm.
whole section on love landing, it gives you a little bit of background and things that we have done and lessons that we could have, and know that we're not ever limited. Like this isn't a box. Like we're never limited. That's the
Yeah.
great thing. That's exciting. Like challenges are exciting for me.
Yeah.
So um, one of the questions or one of the things that you're gonna fill out as a teacher is you're gonna have to tell me like what curricular outcomes are you hoping to cover? So sometimes it could be even like some of our curriculum in Saskatchewan specifically says like something about like Indigenous learnings. I'll tell
Right.
you right now, sometimes people ask me for the art and the dance, like to come out and bring a dancer. That's not within our budget to bring in
Yeah.
a dancer.
Yes.
There's other ways we can do that. So I guess I need to start going to powwows more often and learn some steps to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But that being said, there isn't anything that really we can't do. So having taught for a number of years in a small school where I was never just limited to like one subject for 24 years,
Right.
although math and science was my forte and my gig, I guess you want to call it. I want to be humble about it.
Yeah.
Um, there's nothing that we can't actually maybe look at. So if there's something that you know, especially say you're coming out in June and you know
Mhm.
you're going to be out of your classroom, we kind of, have to justify those reasons for being out of that room. But if we're going to cover something, we can certainly talk about and maybe find ways into it because really Indigenous pedagogy and learning, because pedagogy is just like curriculum is what we teach. And just so we're clear that pedagogy is how we teach.
Yes.
So when we talk about things like Indigenous pedagogy, we can talk about working as holistic learning, like looking at the four quadrants and bringing that in. So we're not limited by like space or being quiet or
Mhm.
we do have some limitations, but I do try and find as many connections that are authentic, that are real, that are
Mhm.
especially place-based, like from within Saskatchewan. That's really important. Although I'm not opposed to bringing in like Inuit like games because
Yes.
they're fantastic. I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you, they're lots of fun. So that being said, if there's something that they would like covered, we can have a conversation. Like I said, I'm fractions, that might be a little tough to teach out there, but you know what? I think I could figure it out. Maybe we could make Bannock or something like that that
Yes.
has ratios and rates and things like that. So, um, we're never really like it doesn't have to be that. But and the other part too is that I want to point out that a lot of people forget about is that part of the curriculum also is the treaty essential learnings. And
Yes.
so those themselves, what a great place to be on the land, to be able to appreciate, to really understand why we need to understand about treaties and how, like, we have specific outcomes for kindergarten to grade 9. And sometimes we kind of forget about those because we're busy and they're not in our, they're not a check mark or whatever, however teachers,
Right.
they shouldn't be. They should just be gently infused in all your teaching. And I guess that's a pedagogical approach is that it's holistic, it's experiential, it means something to the student. They're learning something. So nothing is off the board if they want to have a conversation about something.
And I liked what you said earlier that you're looking for those authentic connections. So how can we take what we're learning or that we have learned during the year in the classroom or in
Yeah.
the fall that we're starting off and able to learn
Yeah.
and work that into or infuse it. I think you used that word earlier, infuse it into what we're learning with the land as our teacher to experience what art might be like when we are outside. What math would you see happening in the world around you?
Yeah.
Science, we're both former science teachers,
Yeah.
so I think there's lots of science connections to the plant and maybe sometimes the animal life that you see, but it could be like you mentioned with holistic learning related to health, outcomes. There's a
Right.
lot of research behind the value of being outside and how that is good for our mental health as well. I'm just trying to run through the different subjects in my head. So we've talked about math and science, health, English. So we could talk about all of the learning that you're doing, some different stories or different pieces that you would learn about in process. It could be
Yeah.
a foods related outcome or a PAA type
Yeah.
of outcome. Did we miss any of the subjects? I think we
Um,
got
you know what? I suppose we could do something in French if our few French teachers that
yes,
are out there, we
yeah,
could probably do something. But,
and
you know,
social also.
and social, oh, social is
Yeah,
huge. It's huge.
yes,
And it's also those other, like we have talked about that, those broad areas of learning that sometimes
yes,
we overlook too, that's a really good opportunity to bring those in again, and I keep saying it, but infusing those that you can talk about. What does generosity look like? What does teamwork look
yes,
like? Like all those things that even technology, because it isn't that Indigenous people were like not didn't have technology. We had really good technology. It was so good that we didn't think we needed to build anything else. Like it was just, does this
yeah,
serve a purpose? Yes, it does. So we need to haul something. Let's make a travoy and move that.
yes,
So it's those things that happen. It's those non I'm trying to think of the words, but like something that you can't really put your finger on that happen.
yeah,
So you're talking about building community and relationships with students, which is so paramount. Like that is the number one thing in Indigenous pedagogy is that building of relationships and how
mhm,
your students, anybody who coaches or has ever coached or done extracurricular knows what I'm talking about. Is that idea of students see you differently, right?
yes,
Especially if you're in a as a teacher, you're in a situation where you're kind of out of your comfort zone. You're not necessarily in control. Well, I'm not saying that like things are chaos. Like
yes,
all the
yes.
chaos is kind of fun,
Everything is
but
safe, everyone is
safe.
well looked
That's right.
after, but it's
Exactly.
definitely for example, if I was to head out there as a teacher, I may not have been out there before. I have an
Yeah.
idea of what I'd like, where I'd like to go, and the outcomes that I'd like to reinforce and have students to be able to experience in nature, but I'm probably not sure exactly how to lead those different types of things. So as
That's
a teacher,
right.
do I need to have an entire lesson plan ready before I get out there, or what's my role as a teacher
Yeah.
when we get to Loveland?
As I said before, I'm really big about this is great actually PD for teachers. I won't lie. I do develop the lesson plans for the teachers and have like all your supplies that you're going to need. They're all made or already accessible. And sometimes teachers give me feedback and say, "Hey, what if you changed?" And they're always great
Yes.
feedback. So we take care of that too. But I always provide a lesson plan. And so when you're out there, you're there as a learner and as a facilitator. So you're learning as you're going along. And so it's that comfortable uncomfortableness. And that really it's that zone where really
Yeah.
good learning happens. So for teachers, you're going to walk away going, wow, I didn't know that. Or I feel really good about the day, right? It was exhausting because we're outside and you're on all the time with kids out there.
Yes.
But it's a good day. Like, it's a rejuvenating day.
Thank you for joining this conversation about the different ways land-based education brings learning to life through the unique opportunities offered at Loveland. We hope this episode sparks some ideas and curiosity around how we can meaningfully connect curriculum, culture, and community, and how the land itself can be one of our greatest teachers. Be sure to join us for part 2 of our conversation, where we begin with what does a typical day look like at Loveland, from the moment the bus pulls up to how we begin the day with smudging, gratitude, and reflection. Penny shares the thoughtful practices that engage and ready students for connection and learning throughout the day. We discuss the flexibility in planning for differing student needs and the ways educators have the opportunity to become co-learners in this experience. So if you're wondering what to expect, how to prepare, or how to make the most of a visit, you won't want to miss part 2. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining our community of innovators and changemakers. We hope the conversations and stories have ignited a spark within. We'd like to express our gratitude to our dedicated Northeast educators. Until next time, remember to subscribe to Any Voices and join us on the next episode as we share the stories of learning shaping our future. Thanks for listening.